Guten Morgen, guten Tag, guten Abend. So let's do Kapitel 15. We're going to do the first 3 units of chapter 15, and that's reflexive. So reflexive verbs and reflexive pronouns, they go together. So let's look at some examples. Reflexive verbs and reflexive pronouns. So look at this sentence. Er sieht einen Spiegel. That's this right here. He sees a mirror. He's looking at the mirror, right? Er sieht einen Spiegel. He sees a mirror. So that is a normal subject, verb, direct object, right? We've been doing that for a while. He sees a mirror, subject, verb, direct object. See how it's in the masculine accusative there? So that's this. Er sieht einen Spiegel. But what about this? Er sieht sich im Spiegel. Now he looks at himself in the mirror. So that's our that is the reflexive pronoun right there, sich, and he sees himself in the mirror. So there's a different set of pronouns based on whether it's just a normal subject, verb, object versus a reflexive object. So when he sees himself, that is going to need a different pronoun than if he sees something else. And then we have sie wäscht das Auto. She washes the car, and then it's just she washes a direct object. The car receives the washing, so it's a direct object. But then we have er wäscht sich, which is he washes himself, and so it's going to be a different situation. Her washing something else versus him washing himself makes a difference, and we get that characteristic sich reflexive pronoun there as well. So here we have some more sentences. Sie zieht das Kind an, meaning she dresses the child. That's this one. She dresses the child. Anziehen, to dress, right? So she does it to the child. It's just a subject, verb, direct object. Normal sentence. But over here we have er zieht sich an, meaning he dresses himself. So sich is our reflexive pronoun there that shows up when someone does something to themselves. And then here we have das Wetter ändert meine Laune, which means the weather changes my mood. So here he is not so happy, but then he becomes happy. The weather changes his mood. So it's like this is normal subject, verb, direct object. The weather does some action to the mood receives the action. But we have this sentence over here, das Wetter ändert sich, which is the weather changes itself, or we also have it in the perfect here, in the past tense, das Wetter hat sich geändert, which is, of course, the weather changed itself, just past tense as well. So we have the sich here, we have sich in this one, and the sich in this one, and this one, because now where it's reflexive, the weather is changing, and of course it wouldn't, sometimes in German there is a reflexive pronoun, and it means himself, herself, itself, and it just doesn't make sense to put it into the English translation. So for he dresses himself, that's fine. You kind of need it, right? He gets dressed, maybe. But if it just says he dresses and then nothing else, then that's really, then that doesn't convey all of the meaning, right? But then if we have the weather is changing, well, that's it. That's the translation, right? The weather is changing itself sounds weird. So in German, I would say that the reflexives are more widespread than they are in English. So there are a lot of cases where you would use it in German, but then you wouldn't put it in the translation. But it's still important to recognize what the sich is doing there, so you can decide, make an informed decision on whether to use it or not, right? And then here we have, habe ich dir mein neues Boot gezeigt? Have I shown you my new boat? So there's no reflexive going on here. It's like, I showed to you my new boat. So nobody's doing anything to themselves. I am showing to you, I am showing the boat. So it's just a subject, indirect object, direct object. But now we have die Sonne zeigt sich, the sun shows itself, which is just a way of saying the sun is coming out. The sun is coming out is like the best translation. But to show the itself, you can say the sun shows itself. Yeah. So that is one. Those are a few examples of how the reflexive is used. Let's look at some English, some to show what it sounds like when they're not used correctly, right? So please allow myself to introduce myself. That's from a movie you may or may not remember. It was pretty big at the time. It was Austin Powers. So he says, please allow myself to introduce, and then he pauses and realizes that doesn't sound very good, myself. So the problem is with that sentence is it's not right to say, let's try some other combinations. Please allow myself to introduce me. Well, that doesn't sound very good either. Please allow me to introduce me. No, it doesn't sound right either. What about please allow me to introduce myself? That is what we're looking for, right? And the reason that it has to be that one is because it's like you allow me, so there's an implied you here, you is the subject, allow is the verb, and me is the direct object. So there's no reflexive situation here. It's you do something to me. But then it's implied I introduce myself. So I do something and I'm also the object. So when the subject and the object refer to the same person, then it has to be the reflexive or else it sounds weird. Okay, so let's try. Reflexive verbs and pronouns are used to express actions that one does to oneself or for oneself. So, ich habe das Brot geschnitten. It's not geschnitten. Ich habe das Brot geschnitten means I cut the bread. It's not reflexive. It's just a normal sentence. I have cut the bread. It's a direct object. It receives the cutting action. But then let's try. Ich habe mich geschnitten. That's very much like English. I cut myself, and it's reflexive. So in this case, you really have to have the reflexive in English too, because it's what if you just said I cut and not myself? Then that doesn't make sense at all, right? Ich habe mich geschnitten. So that seems it's easy enough. It looks. We'll see all the pronouns in a moment, but it also looks like I cut me, but it's actually myself as well. Ich wasche das Kind, not reflexive. I wash the child. But ich wasche mich, I wash myself. It's reflexive. So, ich wasche mich is then I wash myself. Ich bade mich, I bathe myself. So you can see a lot of these like getting ready in the morning type situations need reflexive. Ich dusche mich, I shower myself. Ich kämme mich, I comb myself. So sometimes they don't match up very well in English. We wouldn't, you say I comb my hair or something, and in German, ich kämme mich is a totally standard way to talk about combing your hair. So it literally translates to I comb myself, but English doesn't sound very good. Ich rasiere mich, I shave myself. It's all right, but we might leave off the reflexive pronoun in English. Ich schminke mich, I put makeup on myself. It's all right. Ich ziehe mich an, I put clothes on myself. It's like a little bit much to use the reflexive in English there. And then ich ziehe mich aus, I take clothes off myself. It's kind of superfluous in English, but it's necessary in German. Ich ziehe mich I change the clothes. See, it's like if you really want to shoehorn the myself in there, it's like I change the clothes of myself. It's like shoehorned in just to show that mich is a reflexive pronoun. But of course, in real life, you would just say I change my clothes, right? But in German, you say, ich ziehe mich Okay, so some verbs are always reflexive in German while they are not in English. This is why the German reflexive is much more widespread than the English reflexive. So, ich fühle mich unwohl, I feel unwell. So it's basically, ich fühle mich, so you say, I feel myself unwell. So in English, you would never say myself in there, it's just not how we say it. But in German, to feel a certain way, it always takes that reflexive. Ich entscheide mich später, I'll decide later. So to decide is always going to be reflexive. So you don't just decide, you decide for yourself or something like that. Ich konzentriere mich, I'm concentrating myself. And then ich erinnere mich, I remember. Erinnern actually also means to remind. So the reason that this one is reflexive is because you can actually do it in a non-reflexive way, but then it means to remind. You could say like, Ich erinnere dich would be like, I remind you. So you remind someone else. And then when you remember something, you're sort of reminding yourself about it. That's the idea of remembering. So when it says ich erinnere mich, it's really I am reminding myself, which does translate then to the equivalent of what we would say I remember in English. Yeah. Ich beeile mich, I'm hurrying, so I'm hurrying myself. And then ich erkälte mich, I catch a cold for myself. Ich freue mich, I'm glad. It's just always reflexive, yeah. And then ich interessiere mich, I'm interested. I interest myself for this topic, yeah. So, of course, in all these contexts, or in all these verbs, you just don't have to just leave that, whatever reflexive pronoun it is, just leave it off the translation because it doesn't sound good. Okay, so now we compare all the pronouns we've learned so far to these new reflexive pronouns. So you remember all your nominative pronouns. Ich, du, er, sie, es, wir, ihr, sie, sie. These are like the first set of pronouns. When you first learn to conjugate verbs, you got to have all your nominative pronouns. And then when you learn the accusative, you have to learn those. So mich, dich, ihn, sie, es, uns, euch, sie, and sie. And then at some point we learned the dative pronouns. That was mir, and then dir, ihm, ihr, ihm, uns, euch, ihnen, ihnen. So if it's been a while since you looked at those, just make sure to refresh your memory about how the regular pronouns look. And then now we have just a couple of new pronouns happening in the reflexives. So ich is still going to be mich, ich and mich. So it's going to be mich for the reflexive pronoun as well. And then du is still dich. These are just the accusative reflexive pronouns for the moment. We'll get into, there's one more set after this, but they're very similar to these. So then what we do have to notice is sich. This is a completely new pronoun. It was in that first set of examples we looked at. So sich for er, sie, and es. So it's like he, himself, she, herself, it, itself. And then wir, uns, ihr, euch, sie, sich. This one also takes it. So you formal, you, so it's you formal, yourself formal. And then the they also takes it. They formal and themselves, or sorry, just they, and then themselves in the reflexive. So there's only one new pronoun to learn in the reflexives. It's just that you have to be able to recognize which ones it matches up with. So er, sie, es, and sie, they all take this new pronoun that only occurs in the reflexive, sich. So when you find a reflexive verb in the dictionary, sich is actually the one that is listed with the infinitive. It's because it's like saying oneself. So if, for example, if you had man, M-A-N, like one washes oneself, man wäscht sich. And so when you list the dictionary form, you want to just say like to wash oneself, right? So that's why it has the sich. Sich waschen is then the equivalent of like whatever it is, man and sich, right? Just the impersonal pronoun for nobody, or somebody, I guess. Yeah. Sich waschen, to wash oneself. So sich duschen, to shower oneself. Sich abtrocknen, to dry oneself off. Sich beeilen, to hurry oneself, but not really oneself in English. Sich konzentrieren, to concentrate. Sich fühlen, to feel a certain way. Sich entscheiden, to decide. So you'll see them listed this way, sich plus the verb, and that tells you this is a reflexive verb, and you need to change this reflexive pronoun to match whatever the subject is. So when you make a sentence with a reflexive verb, you need to conjugate the verb for the subject as usual, and also choose the correct pronoun to match the subject. So let's look at sich rasieren, which is to shave. Ich rasiere mich. Of course, it looks like razor, right? To razor oneself, as in to shave. So, ich rasiere mich. I shave myself with a razor. That's how you can remember. Ich rasiere mich. So we've got this conjugated. Rasieren, so we're going to conjugate rasiere. And then mich, we need to match this to the subject. I shave myself. Ich and mich match. And then du rasierst dich. So now we've got our verb conjugated, and then dich matches up with du. And then rasiert sich. He shaves himself. Conjugate and sich for reflexive pronoun. And then wir rasieren uns. We shave ourselves. Ihr rasiert euch. Y'all shave yourselves. And then sie rasieren sich for you formal shave yourself. For example, it's not all of them, but it's most of them. And then we have sich schminken, which is to put makeup on. So, ich schminke mich. I put makeup on myself. I make myself up, maybe. Ich schminke mich. We've got a conjugated verb, and then mich matches. Du schminkst dich. You put makeup on yourself. Schminkt sich. He puts makeup on himself. Sich matching with and then wir schminken uns. We put makeup on ourselves. Ihr schminkt euch. Sie schminken sich. Yeah. So they all have to match. Sich waschen. Ich wasche mich. Du wäschst dich. So sometimes you got other things going on. Like waschen takes a stem vowel change. So it becomes in the du and the s, we have the vowel change happening there. So we have a lot of tools in our toolkit at this point, so sometimes you have to bust them all out at the same time to make something like that. Du wäschst dich, wäscht sich, he washes himself, wir waschen uns, ihr wascht euch, und sie waschen sich. All the people washing themselves. So those are present tense. We just did some in present tense, right? Now let's try in the perfect, in the past tense, involving haben or sein plus the past participle. So, sich rasieren. Ich habe mich rasiert. So we do whatever we would normally do to make the verb tense we want, right? You can do these reflexive verbs and reflexive pronouns. They can be done with any verb tense. So you just take the verb itself, rasieren, and then we're just going to make a past participle. Remember, the past participles with ieren verbs just get the T at the end and no GE at the front. So that's actually a past participle, even though it kind of looks like a present tense verb. But it's combined with habe, so you realize, this is part of a compound verb situation. So, I shaved myself, or I have shaved myself. Du hast dich rasiert. You have shaved yourself. You shaved yourself. Hat sich rasiert. He shaved himself. He has shaved. Of course, the himself is optional. I keep saying it just to show you that the reflexive pronoun is there. But in your translation, you need to always consider whether it sounds better in English without it. Wir haben uns rasiert. We shaved, in parentheses, ourselves. Ihr habt euch rasiert. Y'all shaved yourselves. Sie haben sich rasiert. They shaved themselves. Yeah. Or it could be they or you formal for this one. We don't know because the capital would be in the sentence. Yeah. Okay. So, sich schminken. Ich habe mich geschminkt. Du hast dich geschminkt. Hat sich geschminkt. Wir haben uns geschminkt. Ihr habt euch geschminkt. Sie haben sich geschminkt. Same thing. We got a past participle. And then, so we're just making the perfect like we normally would. And then choosing whichever pronoun matches the subject. Ich habe mich gewaschen. Du hast dich gewaschen. It's an irregular past participle too. You know, you have to remember that happens sometimes as well. Hat sich gewaschen. Wir haben uns gewaschen. Ihr habt euch gewaschen. Sie haben sich gewaschen. So, in sentences that begin with the subject, the word order is, we're going to do the subject first, ich. All right? So this is if we're beginning with the subject, which is very common, of course. And then verb's going to be in the second position, as we know, in a main clause, an independent clause. And then the reflexive pronoun has to come after that. It's just the rule. The reflexive pronoun has to come after the verb if you already have done the subject. And then everything else, maybe you have some adverbs, maybe you have some prepositional phrases, and then of course the direct objects would come after that. So we could do, for example, du rasierst dich niemals. So this one is I wash myself every morning. This one is you never shave in parentheses, yourself. So you shave yourself never. So we need to have that reflexive pronoun coming right after the verb. We don't want to like put it off. Wir duschen uns, we shower ourselves. So that's the word order we've been doing in all these examples. But there are a couple different ways to do it. So we'll go over some other situations that can happen with the word order. When you have a modal verb, the modal verb is in the second position as usual, and the infinitive is at the end as usual. And then you just have to make sure that your reflexive pronoun is following the verb just like the others. So, ich muss mich jeden Morgen duschen. So we've just got this is as you would expect, ich muss. And then sometimes there's like this temptation to have things before the reflexive pronoun, but this goes first and then you wait till the end for the infinitive. Du kannst dich rasieren, verb at the end, and then reflexive pronoun right after the verb. Wir möchten uns vor dem Schlafen baden. We would like to bathe ourselves or take a bath before going to sleep, before sleeping. So then, if the verb has a separable prefix, then that goes to the end as the usual present tense sentence. So just as you might expect, ich ziehe mich an, I dress myself. This one's kind of strange because it's I dress myself. Ziehen means to pull. So this is one where if you didn't look up anziehen, if you didn't know that an was part of ziehen, then it just means pull. And this is like on, because it's like you're pulling on your clothing. It's like I'm going to pull on my sweater, which means I get dressed with the sweater. So anziehen, to get dressed, even though it looks like it means pull on. So, and then of course, abtrocknen. Trocknen means to dry, and then if you add the ab to it, it means like dry off. So you dry yourself off. Wir ziehen uns schnell we change our clothes very quickly. Yeah. So if the sentence does not start with a subject, then the reflexive pronoun comes immediately after the subject. So we have position 1, which can be a number of things. We're going to do an adverb right now, morgen. Then, of course, we got to do our verb in the second position. And we haven't done the subject yet, so that we can't put that off. It has to be next. And then, now we've done our subject. That took priority. And then we can get to our reflexive pronoun. That has to be next. And then everything else. Morgen dusche ich mich 7 Uhr. Tomorrow I shower, or I will shower at 7. Wann trocknest du dich ab? When do you dry yourself off? So subject and then reflexive pronoun. So position 1 was a question word. Position 2 is the verb. Position 3 is a subject. And then got to do the reflexive pronoun right after. Jetzt ziehen wir uns Now, so umziehen together, both of those are change your clothes. And so it's like, now we are changing our clothes. Yeah. So, ich rasiere mich. There's that, right? That's the simple form we've been working on. I shave myself. Ich rasiere mich. Subject, verb, reflexive pronoun. That's the simplest version. And that's in the accusative. So, technically it's a reflexive object, so it's not the same type of direct object as you would normally get, but it's still in the accusative. It's just reflexive in the accusative, because now we're going to add a new element to this where you can actually have reflexives in the dative as well. So these reflexives can be either accusative or dative, but they work a little differently from direct and indirect objects, just because they're being done to oneself, right? So, ich rasiere mich just means I shave myself, and it's implied. It doesn't say what body part, but maybe your listener already knows. It assumes that your listener knows what you're shaving, just somewhere on yourself. And then, if you want to be more specific, you can add a body part, right? So you say, ich rasiere mir die Beine, which is I shave myself the legs, die Beine. That's what's happening here, the legs, right? So that's just a super literal translation to show you what each word is doing is I shave myself the legs, which is not at all how we would say it in English. We would say, I shave my legs. So you can see how the construction is quite different in German. So the reason we have changed from mich to mir here is that we've added the legs into the situation, and now the legs are definitely the direct object. I'm shaving the leg. The legs are really what are receiving the action, and then me is like the indirect recipient. It's like I'm shaving my legs for myself, right? So as long as you're not mentioning any other direct object, you want your reflexive pronoun in the accusative. But as soon as you add something else that is receiving the action, that's the new direct object. And so basically you have this new direct object and it demotes the reflexive pronoun into the dative. It gets bumped into the dative. It can't be the accusative anymore. Accusative is occupied. Okay, so let's look at more of these. Ich wasche mich just means I wash myself in general. It doesn't mention anything more specific. It's just I wash myself, subject, verb, reflexive pronoun. So it's in the accusative reflexive pronoun. But what if you say, ich wasche mir das Gesicht? Now we are saying, I wash myself the face. Das Gesicht is the face. So now the face is the direct object, and it's in the accusative. So what used to be the reflexive pronoun in the accusative has been demoted to the dative. So we have our dative reflexive pronoun here, and then just a regular direct object over here. Ich wasche mir das Gesicht. Ich kämme mich, which is just I comb myself, which you wouldn't say in English at all. You would just say, I comb my hair. You wouldn't even leave off the I comb. This was a really hard one to translate, right? So subject, verb, reflexive pronoun, and it's actually in the accusative. So ich kämme mir die Haare, which is then, of course, subject, verb, reflexive pronoun in the dative, and then direct object in the accusative. Yeah, so these you would just have to, if you come across ich kämme mich, I would say just translate it as I comb my hair, even though the word hair is not mentioned at all. But in English, if you don't say it, then it's not really clear what's going on. And so in rare cases like this, it doesn't even matter. Like ich kämme mir die Haare, I comb my hair. Ich kämme mich, I comb my hair. It's the same. Yeah, but you can see how you can add things in German that aren't translatable. Yeah, but most of them you will be able to make precise translations, because this is kind of an outlier. So we had all our regular pronouns. Hopefully we feel comfortable with those. And then we just added these reflexive pronouns in the accusative for that first set, and we said sich, and sich. Er, sie, es becomes sich in the accusative. Wir, uns, euch, and then sie and sie here becomes sich as well. Now for the reflexives, we have mir and dia. We were just looking at examples with those, mir and dia, but then all the others are going to match. We're going to have sich for all these, and then uns and euch going to maintain their form there, and sich, they're going to stay the same here. So when you differentiate between the reflexives in the accusative and the reflexives in the datives, the only ones you really need to watch out for is ich and du, because it's mir and dia. And these forms are just the regular dative forms anyway. They're not even new forms. So they're pretty recognizable because you already know them from the regular dative. Now we're in the reflexive dative. Yeah. So, and then if you're doing er, sie, es, or sie down here, then these are all gonna just, it doesn't really matter whether they're in the accusative or dative because it's always sich. Okay, so we have ich wasche mich. This is going to be in the accusative. I wash myself. Ich wasche mir das Gesicht. That's in the dative. It's like this we just saw. Ich wasche mir das Gesicht. And then ich sehe mich im Spiegel. That's the accusative. I see myself in the mirror. This is just a prepositional phrase, right? We're not doing something to the mirror. And in that sense, it's I see myself in the mirror. And then ich rasiere mich. I shave myself. But then we'll put it into the dative. Ich rasiere mir die Beine. I shave myself the legs, which is of course really I shave my legs. Ich ziehe mich an. I dress myself. And then here's the equivalent form in the dative. Ich ziehe mir einen Pullover an. I get dressed with a sweater. I put a sweater on, I guess is the best way to say that. I put a sweater on. I pull to myself a sweater on. Yeah, so mir. I put a sweater on. So we have ich kämme mich versus ich kämme mir die Haare. And then we have ich habe mich geschnitten. I cut myself. That's an accusative one. Accusative reflexive. And then we have ich dusche mich. I shower myself. Accusative. And then these two are showing this is actually not a reflexive. Ich putze ihr die Zähne is not reflexive. It's the dentist cleaning someone else's teeth. So he says, I am cleaning her teeth. So I am cleaning to her the teeth. So it's still dative, like it's an indirect object as a pronoun. So it's still a dative pronoun, but it's not a reflexive pronoun because he is doing it to someone else. And then ich putze mir die Zähne, then it's I brush myself the teeth, as I clean myself the teeth, which of course you can translate into English as I brush my teeth. Okay, so we have reflexive verbs and pronouns. In English, we generally do self or selves, and they have accusatives and datives, and they match the regular accusative and datives except for these forms we already talked about. Er, sie, es, sich, sie and sie becoming sich. And then in the dative, we have, these are all reflexives, right? So dative reflexive, we have mia and dia. And those are not going to match these, but they do match the regular dative pronouns. And then sich stays sich. And then same thing for these ones. So, auf dem Fest haben wir uns sehr amüsiert. So the thing is, sich amüsieren means to have fun, to amuse ourselves, right? So wir haben uns amüsiert. We amused ourselves. So there's the uns. Yeah. So der Student setzte sich in die erste Reihe. So he seated himself is the same as like sat down. Yeah, setzte sich. So it would be like der Student is like er, right? So der Student setzte sich in die erste Reihe. Okay. Ich wasche mich schnell, same as the other ones. I'll quickly wash myself. So it has it in parentheses here. You can do either. First I'll wash my hands, but then ich wasche mir erst die Hände. The literal translation is I wash to myself the hands first, but that sounds pretty horrible. So first I'll wash my hands, just convert it to the structure that we use in English for that. And then you can recognize the reflexive in the dictionary usually by the S. The S period is just an abbreviation for sich, and sometimes it'll say an abbreviation for reflexives, or sometimes VR for reflexive verb, right? So usually the most common one is sich. So it'll just list the whole verb as sich amüsieren, and that signals to you that sich setzen, sich waschen. This is almost always how you're going to find it listed. And then that signals to you that it's this sort of situation, but you still need to go about changing it if it's for a different subject. Okay. When a plural or compound subject refers reflexively, the best translation may be each other or one another. Mein Bruder und ich verstehen uns. My brother and I get along with each other. It's something like, my brother and I understand ourselves, right? But sich verstehen, a better translation is then get along with each other. We understand each other is also fine. Yeah, so uns, the plural, sometimes each other or one another. Sounds better for that plural situation. Mein Bruder und seine Frau lieben sich. Yeah, so it looks like they love themselves, right? But it's really like they love each other is really what's happening. Wir gaben uns die Hand und sie umarmten sich. We shook hands with each other and they hugged each other. Yeah. So sometimes at the end of this video, at the end of the videos, you may hear me saying, wir sehen uns im nächsten Video, which is we'll see each other in the next video. So wir sehen uns, we see us, right? It sounds like we see us, but in practice it really means we'll see each other. It's reflexive. Wir sehen uns im nächsten Video, I say sometimes. And that's also a way to like say goodbye to someone. You can say wir sehen uns, like we'll see each other soon. Wir sehen uns. Yeah. And then we have some reflexive verbs just to review some meanings, and there are some new ones in here as well. Sich anziehen, to get dressed, and that slash means it's a separable prefix. So depending on how you conjugate it, it might come to the end, like in the present tense or something. And then sich baden is to bathe oneself. And then sich beeilen, to hurry up. And then sich erkälten, catch cold. Sich hinsetzen, to sit down. So sometimes the hin means downward. It's like this motion of down. So, or it's like away or down. So sometimes you see it with and sometimes without. But the idea is that you sit yourself down. And then sich kämmen, we've had several times. Sich ausziehen, to get undressed. Sich duschen. Sometimes there are cases where it's not completely obligatory to, sometimes people just say ich dusche, like they leave that one off. But in general, this is the form, sich duschen. Sich verspäten, most of these it's not optional, it would sound weird to leave it off. So to be late, to be running late, you could say. I'm running late, ich verspäte mich. Sich erholen, to recover. Sich hinlegen, to lay down, to lay yourself down. Sich rasieren, to shave. To razor yourself, or to shave. Actually, to shave, right? And then, so the expression self is lacking in the English equivalent of the German reflexive actions. So if it's something involving one's own body or clothing, English uses a possessive, my, her, his, where the German usually uses a reflexive construction to indicate that the action is being done to oneself. So sie zieht sich den Mantel an, and so you see how den Mantel is actually the regular article. It's not even a possessive, it's just the normal article. So that's quite different from how we would do it in English. There's one situation where I realized we do this in English, where we're talking about our own body parts, but we still use the definite article the, and it's when you say, I got punched in the face, right? When you say, I got punched in the face, it's implying my face, but why do I say the face? It's like, it's implied my face, but I'm sure there must be other times when we do that. I would be very curious if you know of other times when we say the for our own body parts, but most of the time we say my for our own body parts. Yeah. Okay, so now we have some other common reflexive verbs that don't necessarily translate at all reflexively in English. So we have sich ärgern, to get angry, sich befinden, to be located or to find oneself somewhere. Yeah, or to feel in rare cases too, yeah. And then sich bemühen, to make an effort, to exert oneself, you could say. Sich bemühen, to make an effort. Sich benehmen, to behave. Sich beschäftigen mit, to work on, to be concerned with, to occupy oneself with. Sich bewegen, to move oneself. Not to move residence though, only like physical movement, this kind of movement. If you're gonna move residence, there's a different one for that. That's another umziehen. And then we have sich drehen to be mad, to revolve around. Yeah, so it's like revolve around. And then sich entscheiden, to decide, we had already. Sich erinnern an, to remember. Sich freuen auf, to look forward to. Sich freuen über, to be glad about. So now we're having a bunch of verbs that also have prepositions after them. So they've got several things going on. They're reflexive, and they have a preposition associated with them. And there's a whole unit on this as well. This takes a little getting used to. So don't worry about it too much, but just realize how this preposition will change the meaning of the verb. It's like a set, you know. Sich freuen auf means to look forward to. Sich freuen über means to be glad about. Sich gewöhnen an means to get used to. Sich handeln to be a matter of. And then sich interessieren für, in English we would say be interested in, but in German it's be interested for. So it's just different. Sich überlegen, to consider, to think about. Sich verlassen auf, to rely on. Sich vorstellen, to introduce oneself, and sich vorstellen also to imagine. Yeah, these two can be tricky, right? So ich stelle mich vor, I'm introducing myself. Ich stelle mich vor, I'm introducing myself, versus ich stelle mir vor, meaning I'm imagining in my head for myself. Ich stelle mir vor. Yeah, so that can be a little tricky. And then we have reflexive constructions are also used sometimes as substitutes for the passive. So we have, for example, das Problem löst sich ohne große Anstrengung. The problem is being solved without much effort. Or you could say the problem gets solved without much effort. If you wanted to do it super literally, it would be the problem solves itself without much effort, without a great amount of effort. Yeah, so problem solves itself, but we wouldn't express it that way in English. We would say either it is being solved or it gets solved. In Spanish they do this too with their reflexives, is that the reflexive can be translated as a passive. So the classic example is se habla español, right? So se habla is a reflexive. It speaks itself, right? Se is a reflexive pronoun. So se habla means it speaks itself, but it really, se habla español means Spanish is spoken. So that's the best way to translate it is with the passive, but it's really a reflexive, right? And then die Industrie der Stadt beschränkt sich auf Schiffbau. The city's industry is restricted to shipbuilding. So the industry of the city restricts itself to shipbuilding. Restricts itself, but then it sounds better to say is restricted to in a passive. Diese Theorie entwickelte sich über viele Jahre. This theory was developed over a number of years. So you could say this, if you want to do the exact literal version, it would be this theory developed itself over many years. And of course it didn't, obviously it was developed by other people, but we're not even saying who developed it. It doesn't matter. So you basically just say develop itself, which means the passive, where we've left out the agent. So it's a related idea. And then we have a position of a reflexive pronoun in main clauses. So reflexive pronoun usually follows right after the conjugated verb. I had simpler examples of this earlier, just to show you without all the clutter of some of these sentences. But here are some more complex examples. Der Herzog sah sich nicht als normaler Menschen, sondern als Übermensch. The Duke saw himself not as a normal human being, but rather as superhuman. So sah sich, he saw himself. That's where that is. So it's the verb and then the reflexive pronoun. Die Herzogen zog sich den Schmuck nicht an. So zog is a simple past. And then this one's also simple past. And then the after this verb, we're going to do the reflexive pronoun. Dieses Buch befasst sich mit der Kolonialpolitik Englands. So befasst sich befassen is like to deal with, right? To talk about the subject of. So befasst is the verb, it's conjugated to match the subject, and then sich, it's he, she, it, right? The book, es, sich. Okay, so wir beschäftigen uns mit einem schwierigen Problem. We are working on a difficult problem. We are occupying ourselves with a difficult problem, or beschäftigt. The reason I say occupy yourself is because Beschäftigt is a common word. It's more common in the context of busy. So you could say, ich bin beschäftigt, meaning I am busy. So you busy yourself with it, or you're working on it. Yeah. Okay. So compound tenses, the reflexive pronoun follows the auxiliary while the main verb stands at the end of the clause. So, for example, unter solchen Bedingungen hat sich der Widerstand langsam aber sicher gebildet. So, unter solchen Bedingungen is a prepositional phrase that means under such circumstances. Then we need our second position verb, which is hat. We're in the perfect, right? So we're doing the perfect, and we've got our helping verb hat here. And then we're going to do our reflexive pronoun right after that. That's where it goes. And then, as usual, we would do our past participle at the end of the clause. Die neuen Bundesländer haben sich in den letzten 2 Jahrzehnten äußerst schnell entwickelt. The new federal states have developed very rapidly in the past 2 decades. So the new federal states, die neuen Bundesländer, and then we want to say have developed, it's the perfect again. So haben entwickelt is have developed. So we have our past participle at the end as usual, and so it just shows that that this reflexive pronoun is just following the conjugated helping verb, as you might expect. This word order also holds true for questions, unless the subject is a pronoun. Yeah, this is where it gets a little tricky. This is where you might wonder. This is where the reflexive have a little more of a unique word order. So, hat sich die Frau verletzt? Did the woman injure herself, right? So it's like you would expect it to be something more like hat die Frau sich verletzt, maybe, right? So sich feels like it comes a little early, because if you didn't have that there, it would be hat die Frau. Imagine if it were like a normal direct object. What if it was like das Kind? Did the woman injure the child? It would be hat die Frau das Kind verletzt. A normal direct object would come after the subject right here, right? But since it's a reflexive, it comes a little early. And a yes-no question, it comes earlier than you would expect. Hat sich die Frau verletzt? Did the woman injure herself? Yeah. But so that's where the reflexive pronoun is a pronoun. But then imagine we're going to have the subject as a pronoun as well. Die Frau, it's a noun here, but imagine we want to do a pronoun instead of the noun. Hat sie sich verletzt? Did she injure herself? So now we've replaced die Frau with the pronoun sie, and then it goes in a more expected word order, I think. Hat sie sich verletzt? Did she injure herself? Yeah. Wie befinden Sie sich heute? How are you feeling today? Yeah. And so then, if your subject is a pronoun, then it comes where you think it would. But if the reflexive pronoun, if the subject is a noun, then the reflexive pronoun comes first. Yeah. Okay. So now we have some practice with our reflexives. Bunch of sentences for you to translate and decide what sounds the best to get these reflexives into English. So there's some sentences, and then a little dialogue, and then another dialogue. So viel Spaß, have fun with these exercises, and I will see you in the next video. We will see each other in the next video. Wir sehen uns im nächsten Video. Bis bald. Tschüss.